Hi there. So this is a really simple tutorial following on from the Girls Can Code session that was hosted by Generation UK and Ireland recently. During the session, after panelist questions, I did a little bit of live coding and worked towards getting a really simple HTML and CSS page drafted together. And so this tutorial I've just recorded following on from that, just for those who had watched along, and it was just very much a very basic introductory level. So with that in mind, I'm going to just get started here. So I've done a few little bits already, I will talk through what I'm doing. I won't just kind of go straight into it. But for those that are completely new to HTML, so the idea is that this is a HTML page. This is where all my code is going to go. So this is where I'm going to link to my images, or where I'm going to, put pieces of text or headings. My style page, my CSS page, is where I then style it and add the colors and the fonts and the sizes that I want. So this document here is a doc type of HTML. The language is going to be in English. The header bit here, this is where we kind of put our metadata. So this will be links to our CSS sheet, which I will put in a second, the title of the page and so on. And the title actually refers to this bit that we're able to see here. So if we have a look here, we can see we've got this home page here. So this is where it links across like that. Well, this is for the document that you're looking at. That page is from a different piece of code that's obviously been done. So that's why it says Shaffi homepage. If I was to put that in here, then it'll be replicated when we create one in just a moment. Okay, and this body section here is where all of our main text is going to go and all of our main code. So any links to images and so on. What I've done here is I've used comments. These are slightly different in every language, but essentially anything in between there is not executable. And this just helps me to section out my code. So when I go back to look here, I can identify quickly where the header section begins or the main section, depending on what it is that I'm trying to achieve. With that in mind, we did have a little look at the web page, but I just want to quickly look at just really simple. These aren't proper mock-ups, but this is just because, it's not... it was just a quick thing I've put together in relation. So we know the web page looks like this. This is a very simple wireframes, mock-ups. There's different words for using them. But the idea is that you create a very abstract version of your web page just to kind of get an idea around placement, placeholders, etc. So here I'm going to have my navigation bar. Now I've got the word div here at the side, and this responds to a section. So it's a division. It's a division of a section. And the idea is that we stick all of our code inside of a div tag, which I'll explain and show you in just a moment. I've got another section here, which is where I'm going to have that name and quote. So I have like grey Shaffi, and then it's all in a sort of a darker green. Then I'm going to have another section here, which is going to contain my image and my bio. And in fact, I think the way I've designed my code is this main section is treated as one, and then I split it into a section here. And then this is another section, but within this, there are 3 separate sections because I want to be able to group together the word here and the image so that I can format them as a whole. And it's all very much to do with the way that we format and the way that we shape our code and our page so that we make it easier. The final section then here is going to be where my footer is. So with that in mind, I'm going to start the coding process, and hopefully this will all start to make sense as I do it. So if we just start with the navigation bar. So as default, everything's going to be wrapped inside of these div tags. Now, I'm using Visual Studio Code, so it automatically populates the end because div tags always need the closing, and a closing tag is where we can see this /. But I'm also going to use another tag called a navigation tag. And navigation tags are a block level element that is understood by HTML, by CSS, and it knows that this is you creating a navigation format. Okay. Now, how am I going to do my navigation? I actually want to use a list, but I want to use a specific list, which is an unordered list, which means I can list a load of items. And if it was an ordered list, it would be put in either numerical or alphabetical order. But because it's unordered, it will just do it in the way that I've displayed it. So I've declared I'm going to be using an unordered list, but each item of its own actually needs a list item tag. And so anything that goes in between here is one item. And I'm going to be using an anchor tag to create this, which is going to link across to a page. Now, I haven't created them yet, so I'm just going to put a little hash symbol in here. And in here, I'll be able to actually write the word that's going to be displayed. Now I need a couple of these, so I am going to copy and paste this twice more before I populate it, otherwise I've got to go back and keep changing the text. So in this one I'm going to have HTML and CSS. So the idea is this is going to be across the screen and then it will link to various pages on my website when it's fully built. Now we're going to actually open this file and see what it looks like. And right now it's nothing particularly exciting, but you can see we've got this list. And the fact that they're underlined, we know means they're hyperlinked. So remember I said that by making sure that we use the a tag allows us to hyperlink to somewhere, and then the words in white that we see is the words that are displayed. Now we're going to do formatting. We're going to get this to go across the page. We'll get rid of the bullet points, change the font, get rid of the underscore. All of that stuff is yet to come. But first of all, let's continue adding to our page. So now that I've done this section, I'm actually very quickly able to move on. And this might seem quick to me. I do appreciate that when I first was learning all of this, and I have to say, this wasn't, as I said in the webinar, I first actually learned Python. I'd never done web development. It was the last thing I actually learned to do. I was learning Python because I was teaching computer science and I'd come from sort of an IT training testing background. So it did take me a while to learn HTML and CSS just because it was a totally different way of working than I was used to. So what have I just done? I've used the header section. Now, like the nav section, the header is a block level element. It's an element that it's got its own sort of features, if you like. And it just notifies the code that this is a header. And it recognizes a header is a header. You know, we know the header always goes at the top. It's that sort of bold, kind of individual element. If you actually hover over them in Visual Studio, certainly it will actually explain what those elements do. I won't read the whole thing out, but obviously we know what header is. And then H1 is the header element, so it's the element representing a section heading. H1 is the biggest, and H2 is the next level down, and it goes all the way to H6. And in fact, if I hover over here, that was very loud. It gives me a link. Now, this page you absolutely will need to become very familiar with. It has everything to do with HTML and CSS that you will ever need to know. And in seed here, so you can already see, for example, if I go across to the nav tab, it's able to say, so it represents a section of the page whose purpose it is to provide navigation links and so on. So you can see then different ways to use it, the attributes, examples of how it can be implemented. You can see this is how I've done mine. The only difference is that I've split my list items so the closing tag, everything is underneath. That's just preference. In fact, this is a bit tidier. I prefer it my way just so I can identify my elements much quicker, and you'll see it done in both ways. So I've got two headings here. I've got my kind of big heading, and then smaller again will be this computer science made simple heading. And that's the header bit done already. So let's move on to the main section. Now remember, the main section is a little bit complicated just until you get the head around it. So I have an overall div class, and this div class I'm actually going to give an ID. And an ID is a way that we're able to identify it when we then do some styling on it. Okay, so all of these divs are divs, but this div has a specific ID. It's like giving a hashtag to a photograph. If you hashtag something, I say hashtag, we use the hash symbol, that's the actual name, but we know what hashtag is. If I wanted to look for like cooking recipes for how to make, an egg sandwich, I would look for hashtags containing egg sandwich and hope that I would see some egg sandwiches. And so it's very much the same concept. It allows us to directly reference something, and we actually do use the hash symbol in CSS, which you'll see in just a moment. So within this container, I have another two sets of containers, and I'm going to name these as well. And this is really important for when it comes to styling them. Also, it just really helps right now while you're getting your head around these different sections. So one of them is going to be the About Me, where I'm going to have my blurb and my photo. And the other section is going to be Experience, which I will write out fully so that, because naming convention, naming and coding, it's almost a myth. It's like one of the most difficult things to do. I would know if I came back and said EXP because I know what my website is about. But for someone who's never looked at it or just looking at the back end code, it would be a little bit of a mystery. So with that in mind, once we've got our experience together, then within this class, I have two separate areas. Okay. So this one is where I'm going to be putting my actual blurb, my paragraph, if you like, and my photo. And then underneath, I have another section which is going to be made up of three sections. Now, I know you're right now, you're thinking, Grace, what on earth are you doing? And it does seem confusing at the beginning, but once you get more used to it, and honestly, this is the thing that took me the longest to get used to. What I often do is I go back, and I don't often use mock-ups because I'm not a web designer by trade. I know how to do it. So, but I do actually draw stuff for everything, even whether I'm writing flowcharts. I have a massive whiteboard behind me, but I will go back to this so it starts to make sense. And I will go back to if I'm doing any type of software application or I'm building something in PyQt5, I will always draw it out, and then I'm able to like go back and check. I mean, it helps in PyQt5 because you've built the screen manually anyway, using Designer. But so remember this section here, I've got my overall div section, then I've got two separate divs, and then the bottom div has its own three divs. So I should have my overall div section, then I've got two separate divs, and then, oh, okay, so I've split mine up ever so slightly. Of course I have, because this is my About Me section. So this is just a little bit of confusion. So let me get rid of this one. And this is why it's really good to go back and check, because actually with all these divs, even I started to get a little bit confused. I need to make sure I don't delete too many. So open div, closing div, open div, closing div, always go back and check them. So inside this one, I need my three divs. Now that looks more like the drawing we did originally. So, you know, this is it. Live coding, literally had to go and check it myself before I moved on. So we've got our overall section, and then I've got an About Me section, which is going to have an image and it's going to have a paragraph. And in fact, I'm just going to pop these in here and I'm going to come back and populate them in a second. And then I've got my experience, which is going to be made up again of an image and a paragraph. So in fact, why don't I just go through and paragraph. And you'll get so used to copy and pasting. I know that I need this in the exact format in each one of these. So I'm going to come along and I'm going to chuck them in here. Now I know this is looking a little empty right now, but we're going to fill it out. So I have some images saved. So source. The source means where am I finding these images from? And I have an images folder, and I'm going to be using the me image. Now Visual Studio, which I hope that you all embrace, because as you just seen, I put in my folder, it was literally able to tell me exactly what was in there. So this alt bit is a way that if for any reason the web page doesn't load, it will still be able to explain what's happening. So that's a really important bit to have. Okay, so and then the paragraph here, I have pre-prepared a little bit of stuff about me, just so that I didn't have to write it from memory. And I'm just going to put this in here. If I put anything else in, let's just go and check the progress of our page and see how we're getting on. So I think it's this one. Okay, so I mean, it's not exactly looking like the one I want it to, but you can see the content is there, and we've just got to format this and get it looking how we want. So this is the point where you need to kind of really understand that there are two key differences to this development stage. One of them is content. What images, heading, what do you want on that page? How do you want it? In what order do you want it displayed? You know, what actual content is going to go there? Focus on that first. The hardest bit really is the next stage, which is how to format it, because you have your own style. And, you know, this for me is like, I'm a proud mama looking at this because I am really bad at front end design. So this took a lot of time to get it looking clean. Some of you will be the most beautiful front end designers. I'm much, much more confident in back end design. I find algorithms really, really fascinating. This is really difficult for me. So with that in mind, it took me a long time to get my head around getting CSS, not the context of the syntax, but just actually getting it to look half decent and not be like a bit of a weird mess. So first get your content on the page and then come back. And I often I've got two monitors and I will just play around with it. And you can do it live in the console, which I will possibly show you. Let's just see how we get on for time. So with that in mind, let's go back to this section. At the moment, it's blank. So Again, I'm going to be using that images folder, and I have 3 different sections. I have teaching, training, and dev, and each of these just has a different picture. And just going to quickly put through now. It's really little point. Always try and edit your photos and make sure you crop them to the size that you're going to want them roughly to be on your web page. It's just easier, trust me. Otherwise, you've got to do a lot of formatting, and the dimensions can change. And without getting into all the things around kind of pixels and how images scale, it's just easier if you open them up, get them to roughly the size. So I've cut all of these 3 to the exact same size. And I am just going to, just because it's a really good habit to do it, I'm going to put my little alt in. And it's very unlikely that web pages don't load kind of the images in the way. But for example, if I was hosting this in an online platform, say I was using like kind of Amazon Web Services or something, and for some reason something happened to my S3 bucket, which is like a bucket, it's a storage system where you can hold files, and I might have all the images, or maybe I didn't configure it properly and they weren't accessible to the general public, and then my web page wouldn't load. This would allow people to know what images should have been there. So was it just an image, or actually is that an infographic that has like the menu for the website, kind of an important thing that you're looking for? You might be looking for the menu, but maybe it was literally just saved as an image. So it's always good to have that. And then in this bit here, I'm literally just going to put like a little heading. So I'm going to put teaching, and then I'm going to put training, and then software development. And as I said before, there is no need to split the tags out like this. It's just me. It's just how I do it. Some people do it like this. Some people will have it all on one line. So equally, this means the exact same thing. You do obviously need to make sure that your div tag ends here. I prefer to have it like this because it's just much easier. But as long as it has an end tag, it doesn't matter. But this is the same as this. It's just a preference. Okay, so I'm going to Control S that, and I'm going to head over, and we're going to see how our web page is looking. And lovely. So you can see these images are the same size because I got them the same size. So I haven't even formatted them yet. And that does mean that it'll be so much easier because I'm literally just going to format the edges of them. I'm not going to have to like manually scale. Maybe this one was twice the size and so on. Okay. So last section then, before we go on to the CSS bit. And over here, I'm going to use the footer tag, which, as you can imagine, lets the page know. So represents a footer, which is the very bottom of the page. So typically contains information about its sections, such as who wrote it, and so on. Do you know, I've just realised I'm going to zoom in a little bit on this code because I'm hoping that it's actually recorded properly. We shall soon see. So now that the footer's there, so what do we need to put in our footer tag? So I'm going to have a paragraph. And in my paragraph, I am going to have kind of like a heading, I guess. So I'm going to introduce you to this tag, which I actually am going to go back and put in a few other places. And this tag kind of creates like a break element. So it represents like a line break. So it just physically starts the next line. And the only reason I'm doing this is just, in fact, I don't need to do this at this point because I don't need to have any space at the top of it. So I'm going to take that bit out actually, because that's just bad practice. I should be using margins when I want to create space. But I'll explain all this in a second. So I'm just going to kind of put like a little thing saying, follow to my socials. But at this point, this is where I'm going to use my line breaks. It's just going to create some line breaks so that I don't have to have separate tags and then sort of format them all. It's all part of the same kind of bit of information. I'm also going to introduce to another tag, which is called strong. And the strong tag here, so represents strong importance, seriousness. So it basically kind of like exaggerates, makes the content sort of stand out a little bit more. So I'm going to put this in here. Okay, cool. So I've got my first paragraph tag. Now I'm going to put a couple of links in. So I'm going to use some A links. And remember, these are hyperlinks. And what do I want to do? I actually want to link across to my Instagram page. So I've already got this ready. So just come across here, copy the URL. Don't worry that you don't see all the HTTPS and stuff. It's going to populate that for you when you copy it, okay? And then I'm going to put over here, and I'm going to put, I want to use. So at the very top here, we had this thing called Font Awesome, and I didn't really explain what Font Awesome was for, but I'm going to do that now. And I actually have the link to it open. So Font Awesome is a load of really, really cool symbols, all the symbols that you're used to using ever. So for example, say I wanted to use like an Amazon symbol. I can come along here and it literally shows me, and then I'm able to get the code that I need to use. Okay, so I can start using this icon, and up here you can see this here. So this is the HTML for it. So in fact, to make this really easy for myself, I'm going to look for the LinkedIn symbol. I'm going to use, no, I prefer the other one. I'm going to use this one here. I'm going to get, I think this one, I really like this one. And then I'm just literally going to copy this HTML. Then all I need to do is come across, stick this inside my A tag. And because I've got this link at the top of my page, which I got off the website earlier on, it automatically knows where to go and find the most updated version of that. Okay, so that's going to be my little LinkedIn tag. And then I'm going to put another one in here, which is going to be kind of an email one. It's just a really little quick trick I want to show you. So if you put mail to, it will automatically, the web browser will open up. So let's say Shaffi. That's not actually an email address, but something like this. Then it will automatically open up the person's email provider and it will start writing an email with your email address self-populated in it, which I'm not going to show you right now because I don't even think I'm signed into an email browser right now. So mail envelope, I'm quite a fan of this one. So again, I want to choose a size 3 because that's the same size as the one that I used earlier. And again, it's going to save me from having loads of formatting. And I'm going to put this in here. Okay, so the last thing I want to do then is I'm going to put in, so what I want to introduce you to next, just quickly, is I'm going to put in this HR tag. So the HR tag, it creates so it says here, it represents a paragraph level themic break. So it's essentially where you're in a section, but you want to kind of create this break between two sections. And visually, what that actually does is create this kind of line. So I'm going to go back and add a few more of these elsewhere. And it will span the same width as the section. So down here, I'm using one here as well. So that's what this tag does. And then I want one final P tag. And inside that, I'm just going to put like a little bit of a blurb. So I'm going to say website built by, I don't want that to be uppercase. We'll say Grace Shaffi. And then in here, what I want to do is put another A link. And what I'm just going to leave this blank for the moment. What I normally do in here then is put the link to my GitHub, just so that, people want to go check out other stuff that I'm doing. So where is our font awesome? It's over here. So again, I'm going to go to GitHub. I'm going to find the symbol that I would like. I'm a big fan of this one. I'm going to make sure I choose 3. And I'm going to copy this HTML. And I'm going to put that in there, okay? And one last thing that I'm going to put in this bit that isn't in here is this area hidden. I'm going to set this to true. And what this does is it indicates whether the element is exposed to an accessibility API, which it just basically it's relating to being able to link across to the API, which relates to this particular link. So, but that's nothing to particularly kind of worry about at this point, or nothing that, it's something to kind of learn later down the way, yeah. And then what do I want to do? Last thing is I'm going to put in a copy. So, the sort of copyright symbol. So if you actually put at and then copy, it automatically creates that for you. And then I can just put Shaffi CS. So my little kind of branding. Awesome. So let's go ahead and check out how that's looking so far. Okay, so we can see we've got our little symbols. And this is actually, like, these links are live even though the web page isn't, because it is still hosted in a browser. So you can see it actually took me across to my web page there. And I've got my whale one, and you see I've got my little copy symbol, which I'm going to zoom in a little bit on. Cool. So with that in mind, now it's time to do the bit to make it look pretty, because right now this is, functional, but who would want to look at that? It is not looking super pretty. So over here, I've got my CSS page and I've already populated this with the headings, but I am going to explain what I'm doing as I do them. And I'll be honest, this was just purely for time, in that I had to get a lot of things done. I've got like quite a big exam coming up, and so I wanted to make this video as I discussed, but hard coding it from complete scratch was just a little bit more labour intensive on this occasion. The reason that these are all underlined is because I haven't got anything in here yet. So let me talk you through this. First thing is I'm going to use a particular font from Google. I'll talk you all through that in a second. And so this link is going to go at the top. Now, whenever I want to style a particular part of my sheet, I reference the tags that it relates to. So this here, my head and my body tags, HTML, sorry, means that anything under the HTML, so that's here right down to the very bottom, and anything from body right down to the end body tag, which again is right at the very bottom here. And in fact, this shouldn't be under the body tag, so I'm glad I came back and checked that, will be applied the formatting as per listed in this section here. So here are unordered list, any formatting we want to do will be applied to anything with the unordered list tag from when it begins until when it ends. And it applies it to any unordered list tag in the entire web page, which is why IDs were so important, because if I just put in div, it will apply it to every single div. But if I say main, it applies it only to that in the main. So from this div tag to the end of the main div tag. So hopefully that makes sense. And now we can actually get on with doing some of the formatting. And I'm going to try and explain this as best as I can. There's quite a lot of it to get through. But as I said, I'm really going to try and make sure that I explain all of this and that you know what I've done. So before we do any more, I want to just quickly talk to you about this Google Fonts, because obviously I mentioned I was using it. And Google Fonts is a great place. You can come along, just type in Google Fonts. And I actually typed the one that I knew I needed, and it literally shows you pretty much every font ever known to mankind. But if you find one that you like and you click on it, and I say, okay, I want this version, this regular one, and then you go to embed, it gives you the code here you need. So this bit here, okay, is if you're putting it in a CSS style sheet. If it's going straight into your HTML document, so you don't have a separate CSS style sheet, not really ideal, but people still do it. You want to copy the whole thing. And then this bit here is what we actually use in order to be able to apply our font. So I'm going to get started with this one. And what I want to do is I want to apply some formatting just to this whole section. So I'm going to set it to the height of the page, or the height of these sections want to be 100%. And the width want to be 100%. And that just, there's just like a little pesky kind of margin that sits around it, and it just gets rid of that. The color relates to the font. So background color is a different thing, okay? And this is kind of an off-gray kind of font. My background color is going to be azure. So it's kind of like an off-whitey color. And this bit, the font family, is where I'm able to then put in my specific font family, which it copied that whole thing. So I don't need that. And this means that everything in that page now is going to be applied to that style. So if we go back and have a little look at it and see how we're getting on. Okay, I'm so glad this happened. I'm not, but I am. The reason this isn't working is because I haven't linked the style sheet. So over in this bit here, I'm going to use the script tag. No, I'm not. I'm going to use the... Oh, what tag is it? My brain has gone completely dead. The link tag. I'm going to use the link tag, and it pre-populates in Visual Studio to be a style sheet, and I'm just going to name the thing. So it's going to be style.g, no, style_g.css, and that's going to link through the formatting. So that's just that file name there. So hopefully if I go back now, this should work. There we go. So we can see some changes are starting to happen. Still got loads more to do though, so let's crack on with this. Again, these are comments in CSS, so slightly different. It's the / asterisk / so that's how you do those. So unordered list, I've got a few different things I want to apply to this. So I want to do list style as none, and this basically gets rid of list style type, sorry, it's going to be none. It gets rid of the bullet point. So I could have like bullet point numbered, etc., etc. I'm going to put overflow is hidden, and this means if there's a sort of the words are longer than the space allocated, then it just hides it rather than sending it all out of proportion. Now our margin is kind of the area to the top, the bottom, left or right around an object on our page. And remember that all of these are just kind of all these sections are objects. So we've got a navigation object and so on. And this, so I'm going to set this as top and bottom is going to have no margin because I want it to be right at the top. But I want 30 pixels for left and right. Pixels being just very small measurements and pixels on the screen. So 30 isn't a lot. And then I'm going to set the width of this to 100%. Cool. I'm going to do a little bit more formatting. Now, the next thing I want to do is for every individual item, I want to float them left. And what this is going to do is start stacking them left to right as opposed to up to down. Okay. And then in terms of the display of what they actually look like, I want to set the display to what's called block. And this just gives them some nice sort of space around them. I'm going to set them as a color of, we'll do dark slate gray. And then I'm going to put some padding around them, which again is similar to margin. It's like a little buffer area of 15 pixels top and bottom. And I'm going to use text decoration, none, which gets rid of the formatting, the underline, and kind of the thing that you get of a hyperlink. And I just want to add some little letter spacing as well, because I feel like this just makes the words look a little bit easier to see. And font size. Now I'm going to use pixels for font size. I normally use what's called M or REM. Sometimes I'll even use percentages, and they're just all measurements, but just for the moment, pixels is just kind of easier to stick with one of them. The more you do, the more you'll be able to learn. Okay, cool. See, we've now started to get this. They're still not quite where we want them to be, but we just need to add a little bit more formatting. Now, the next thing I want to do is just this last little bit, which is the hover. So what this means is when you are hovered over, so when your cursor is hovering over, I want you to just change color. And I'm going to change this to dark grey. Now, if I just go back and look at this, there we go. Just changes the font. Cool. So we're kind of on the header section now. So this is our big block of text at the top, and I want to add some coding to this bit. So I want to apply the first bit of coding to the entire div container. So this is the whole section around it. I want 30 pixels top and bottom, and then I want 5% left or right. And the reason I use percentages, it's really nice so if you think 5% of the total page width to the left and to the right will then be a margin. So it will essentially just leave a nice little even gap. And even when I scale down my page, it will always just be able to work out the 5%. And then text align is going to be center. So that will make all of the text on this section in the center. And then I'm going to use aquamarine as my background color. But real thing for this color, I don't know what it is about it. Cool. I'm just going to go back here and check. See, now I've got some formatting to do in terms of like padding and stuff, but we're starting to get there. So the header one, so just specifically to the first header, I want to add some padding around the words. So remember, that's that little kind of, and when I put it in like this, when I don't put it separately, it just means top, right, left, and bottom will all be that. If I wanted to say like padding left, I could actually isolate one of them on their own. And I also want to change my font size to 25 pixels. And then for header 2, I just want to add some padding to the bottom, because remember, I've already got padding all around header 1. If I add padding to the top and the bottom of header 2, they're going to be really far apart, which is why I want to make it a little bit smaller, but it's why it's different like that. If I go back and look at this, okay, now what I do need to just check is my font size, because this is 25, this is 15, which doesn't make sense, because it should be a different header 1 and header 2. So I want to go, let me just double check my code. Let me make sure that I've used, header 1, header 2. Okay, I'm going to come back to this in just a second and work out exactly what is going on. Oh, that's why, because header 2 hasn't had a font size change. So I'm going to make this 35, and I might just leave that one exactly as it is. There we go. That's fine. I like that. That'll work. Cool. So we're about halfway there. So next section then is the About Me. So for the About Me section, I want to add a margin of, I'm going to do 40 pixels to the left and right. And I'm going to do 15% this time of the page width to the, 40 to the top and bottom, 15 to the left and to the right. Let's take that caps lock back off. I'm going to text align center all of this text as well. I'm going to add some nice letter spacing. So this is the whole About Me section is going to have this nice letter spacing. And I'm going to float left because I'm going to have two things in them, a paragraph and my image, and I want them to float left. So in other words, this is how we get things to be in line across the page as opposed to stacked on top of each other. Now for the image itself, I want to add some additional formatting. So see here, we've used this hash symbol, About Me. So that's saying within that section, that image. So not all images, just the one within that section or any within that section. And remember, we split out About Me and Experience so that I could format them differently. Now, remember I said earlier that it's always good practice to get your picture the size you want it. And the reason for that is, if I go back to here for a second, this image is currently, before I refresh the page, the size that it was saved in my files. See, now I've just changed the size of it manually. Whereas these are the size that they are saved. So that's why if you have an image that's absolutely massive, you're going to have a bit of an issue when it comes to formatting it. So position relative. So the idea of this is that it sets out how an element is positioned in the document. It's a bit complicated to explain that right now, but it's kind of, you'll understand the more you use it when to use the right one. And then margin is going to be 20 pixels and 50 pixels, and the border radius is going to be 30%. What is the border radius? So the border radius is what essentially creates that nice curved look around my image. So if you watch a sec, there we go. It's just kind of, so these ones I'm going to put 50% border radius on, and it's going to make them completely circular. So it goes up to 50%. Anything over that is already circular, so it can't go any further. So if you just wanted a soft edge, you might put maybe 10 or 15%. This is 30%, 50% is even further in. Now, the paragraph itself is going to need a little bit of formatting. So I just want to put a bit of a margin around this. And I'm putting a bit of a bigger margin because of the fact that there's not huge amounts of text, and it's just kind of creates the size and the image that I want. Font size, I'm going to go for like 15 pixels, and I might need to go for like 12 pixels. We're going to see in a second. I might need to change that. Letter spacing is still going to be 1 pixel because I always just think it's a good idea with any sort of font that it's not completely on top of each other. And line height, so obviously how high the line is from top to bottom. So let's see how, oh no, that is so small. So let's go for, instead of 12 pixels, let's go for 20 pixels. Touch too big, so let's go for 15. And obviously what I'm doing right now, this is literally how I do things in real life. Sometimes, now this is I'm not used to being such a little small monitor. Let's see, this is at 100%. Okay, so here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to just change this a little bit, and this is going to be slightly different to how I've actually coded it, because I normally code this on a much bigger screen. And it's interesting actually that when I do on a smaller one, I suddenly have to reevaluate my margins on things. So I'm going to actually just allow that page more space generally by just reducing how big. Yeah, that's better. So I've just taken down how much space is to the side, and then I'm going to increase that font size a touch, just a little bit more, because obviously the fact that I can't see it is not really cool. So I'm going to go for 18 pixels, I think. Cool, that's better. That's more work I like. And see, the letter spacing just makes it really easy to read. It just makes it loads nicer. So one thing that I've realized that I've missed out is I've missed out a few different things with, so this experience bit, I've actually missed out a P heading, which should actually, no, it should be a header 1, I think, or a header 2. I just realized looking at it, it should literally say the word experience. So Visual Studio Code actually has a spell checker built in, which is really handy and can be really annoying when you accidentally click it and you think that's not what I wanted. And then what I want to just do is underneath these ones, I just want to put, so I'm going to put these header, these little lines that just kind of give that really nice visual effect. Let me just go back and check this. There we go. I knew something was missing. Now it's looking better. So let's get my code open again. And I'm going to go back across my CSS. I'm just going to zoom in on this a little bit. That's better. And cool. So now I can actually start dealing with the experience formatting just to make sure it looks good. So now I need to remember that I changed my margin ever so slightly to 10% earlier. So I want 50 pixels top and bottom, but I only want 10%. And then I want to text align everything into the center as normal. I want to do my letter spacing of 1 pixel. I'm going to choose my position as relative, and I am going to put no float. What's missing? Here we go. That needs to be on the end there. Cool. So next bit then is my each section. Now this is kind of important because I had those kind of different sections that break up. So those individual div sections that are just called div, remember they didn't have anything extra. I want to inline block them. So I want to have them in a line, but I want them to be blocked into having their own space each. And then font size, I'm going to go for, I feel like 18 pixels seems to be a good number. Might need to change that. Then last but not least, I'm just going to do something with the image. So I'm going to say, I'm going to have a border radius of 50% and make it nice and round. And I'm just going to create a bit of a margin around it. So I'm going to do 30 pixels and then 50 pixels left and right. So 30 pixels top and bottom. Let's see how this is looking. Awesome. Although my border radius has not been applied. So let me just go back and see what I've missed out there. And I need a bigger font. It's not the font size I want. Aha, border radius. I'm missing a word. What I'm also going to do is I'm just going to reduce the size of these files a little bit more. As I said, now this is where, ideally I would just go back and I would normally just change the file and just crop it a little bit smaller, save it as a smaller size. I'm not going to be able to do that right now just because of time's sake. So I'm just going to make these like 200 pixels by 200 pixels. And it's only because I wanted them all to be on one line, and they are when I'm on my really big monitor, but they're not so much when, there we go. So I've just got them kind of in line now, and I want to change this training teaching software. So I want to make that bigger because it's tiny and I can't see it. So I'm going to go across to this bit here. And what am I doing? Font size. Let's go for 25. Because the thing is, it's kind of like a bit of a standalone section, so it doesn't need to be really tiny. Even still, did I save that page? They just don't look like they've grown in size at all. About me, paragraph. That's why. Is it? Maybe. Let's have a look. Let's go back. They have not got any bigger, surely. No, but that's got bigger. Let's go back. Hang on. So, that's because it's meant to be there. That one is what I want it to be 20. And let's take this one back down. They were originally, was that 18 originally? And font size. Yeah, that should work. Okay, let me just go check my little page. Okay, I'm going to come back to this in a second. It'll be something really silly that I haven't noticed. Okay, now with my footer, last little bit of formatting and then we are actually done. So float is going to be none. So again, I don't want these items to float. I want to create a margin on the top of 100 pixels because this is obviously the very bottom of the page and I really want to make sure. And I do then need to do margin left and right separately. I'm going to keep these as 15% because this is like the bottom section. So it doesn't really need to kind of, I want that extra space around them. I'm going to text align everything in the center. Letter spacing can be 1 pixel. And then for each of my anchor tags, am I missing something here? I am. So, no, I'm not. I don't because I just got rid of my little image. I had like a little logo in there, but I got rid of it. So the color is going to be grey. So remember, this is my font color. Now, this last bit here, this relates to those FA. So remember that it was like FA, whatever symbol. If we go back and actually look at the code, it'll make more sense. This bit here. So this FA is referring to these particular items. Okay. Again, you can get all of this off of the website so you know exactly what to do in terms of styling it. And the font size, now I am going to use the REMs just because it's another measurement size. You will get used to using the different ones and you'll know when to use each one at the right time. And I'm just going to put 0.5. Now, the reason I'm doing this and not sort of working out the pixels is because I use the same footer every time I build a website and then just change it slightly. What I mean by that is if it's my website and it's a project of my own and I'm going to be putting all my own contact information in, then I do use my own details. And I'll just make these aquamarine to make it easier. Therefore, I just literally kind of know this formatting and I tend to copy it just out of an old document where I've already done it. It's really important, and I spoke about it, and we all spoke about it in the web conference, in that you really are not expected to remember every single thing. It's unrealistic. Right, let me just see, what have I done here? Do I need to put, surely it doesn't actually have to just be RGB, we shall see. So this RGB does allow me to specifically dictate what combination. There's lots of different ways to do colours. I just wonder. It's going to create virtually the same colour anyway. But normally I always have it like this. Oh, I know why. I just realised it's this bit here. Okay. I could have just put aquamarine. And you can see with Visual Studio, it actually lets you pick up a colour picker. What this does is it basically overrides the original content, the original formatting that comes with it as standard. So when you see this important bit, that's what it's talking about. So with that in mind, if I refresh this, nice. So you can see it's green. It kind of changes colour when I hover. We've got it all separated out. There's a few changes. So we can see here that this must have been when I've gone through and I was changing the wrong section. So I'm going to go back and correct this in that like my font has lost its the font size is too big for the heading. So what I want to do is I just want to work out where this has gone wrong. And I want to make sure that, so I'm just going to zoom out of it just for a second so it's a little bit bigger. So my About Me section is covering this bit of font and then experiences everything else. So I'm just going to double check that I've not accidentally changed. So I've got my line height. I've changed. You remember earlier I went back and tried to change it. I swapped these around. That's why it looks really funky. Voila. Okay, so there we are. And this obviously, as I said, it's a really simple introduction, but hopefully watching me do that and I'm just understanding some of those key concepts around kind of how to lay it out and how to approach formatting. This is like the beginner step. This is really where you want to begin. Get good at this and then start looking at, so I use Bootstrap personally and I make it really interactive and like to add loads of stuff in. I say this, I genuinely prefer back-end development. So I build really basic front ends and focus my energy on the back end, but this is obviously something that is an essential skill. I think what made it easier for me was knowing how to build software in things like Android Studio and PyQt5, which is a Python software development kind of concept. And therefore I already knew how to use buttons and widgets and all of these different things. Whatever path you choose, you will eventually get to the point where at some point you'll kind of need to know this concept of building something and then being able to interact with it through buttons and text and links. So, this is as good a place to start as any. So I hope this has been useful and look forward to seeing some of you when we do the next conference in the coming future.